My name is Delia, and I'm 32 years old. Right now, I'm packing boxes in what used to be my dream home, the Colonial in Westchester, that my husband Marcus surprised me with 3 years ago. I can hear his voice drifting up from downstairs, loud and confident, as always surrounded by his poker buddies. I pause when I hear my name mentioned, then freeze completely when he says those words about finalizing the divorce. The laughter that follows feels like knives piercing through my chest. I set down the picture frame I was holding and walked toward those stairs with one question that would change everything. Before I share what happened next, let me know where you're watching from. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted completely, please subscribe to hear how this story unfolds. I met Marcus in the law school library during finals week 8 years ago. We were both cramming for constitutional law, and I was running on 3 hours of sleep and pure determination. He appeared at my table with 2 cups of coffee, sliding one toward me without even asking if I wanted it. That simple gesture, that awareness of what I needed before I even knew it myself, that's what drew me to him initially. Marcus had this incredible charm that made everyone in a room gravitate toward him. He was ambitious, driven, the kind of man who spoke about his future like it was already written in stone. When he looked at me, really looked at me, it felt like I was the only woman who had ever existed. Our study sessions turned into dinner dates. Dinner dates turned into weekend trips to vineyards upstate. And before I knew it, I was completely in love with this man who made me feel like I could conquer the world alongside him. The proposal came during my father's 60th birthday party. My parents had rented out their favorite Italian restaurant, and the whole family was there. Marcus asked my father for the microphone to make a toast, then dropped to one knee right there in front of everyone. My mother started crying before he even opened the ring box, and my father, this stern federal judge, who never showed emotion, actually wiped away a tear. Marcus's vows were perfect, talking about building an empire together, being partners in everything, supporting each other's dreams unconditionally. We got married 6 months later in my parents' backyard. It was a small ceremony, just family and close friends, exactly what I wanted. Marcus's vows that day still echo in my mind sometimes. He promised to never forget where we started, to always remember that success meant nothing without someone to share it with, and that I would always be his priority above any business deal or opportunity. Those first 2 years of marriage were everything I thought they would be. We were both working at law firms, his in corporate mergers and mine in contract law. We'd meet for lunch when we could, grabbing sandwiches from the deli between our offices and eating in the little park nearby. Evenings were spent reviewing each other's briefs, debating legal theories, dreaming about the future we were building together. Then Marcus decided to leave law and start his tech company. He had this idea for an app that would revolutionize how small businesses handled inventory management. The passion in his eyes when he talked about it was infectious. He needed startup capital, though, and banks weren't interested in lending to someone with no tech background. So I became his first investor, taking on extra cases, working weekends, skipping vacations to fund his dream. We moved from our nice apartment to a tiny studio in Queens. I remember eating ramen noodles 5 nights a week, shopping at thrift stores, cutting my own hair to save money. But it felt like an adventure we were on together. Every small victory with his company was our victory. Every setback was something we faced as a team. When his app finally got funding from a venture capital firm, Marcus picked me up and spun me around our cramped kitchen, both of us crying and laughing at the same time. He promised he would never forget who stood by him when everyone else thought he was crazy. Those words felt like a sacred vow, maybe even more important than our wedding vows. The company grew faster than either of us expected. Within 18 months, Marcus had 30 employees and a real office in Manhattan. The little startup was becoming something significant, and with that success came changes I didn't see coming at first. We bought the house in Westchester with his first big profit distribution. It was everything I'd dreamed of growing up, a white Colonial with black shutters, a wraparound porch, mature oak trees in the yard. I spent months decorating every room while Marcus worked increasingly long hours. I told myself it was temporary, just until the company was more established. The dinner party started as networking necessities. Investors, potential clients, other startup founders would come to our home, and I'd cook elaborate meals, play the perfect corporate wife. I'd hear Marcus introducing me as his wife, never mentioning my own career, my own accomplishments. When I brought it up later, he said it wasn't relevant to business discussions. My father got sick that winter, diagnosed with pancreatic cancer that moved fast and brutal. I spent every evening at the hospital holding his hand, talking about old cases, trying to memorize the sound of his voice. Marcus came to visit exactly twice. The first time he stayed for 10 minutes before taking a call. The second time, he didn't even make it to Dad's room, claiming an urgent investor meeting had come up. The funeral was on a Thursday. I remember because Marcus complained about missing his monthly poker game with his college friends. During the service, while I was giving the eulogy about my father's integrity and dedication to justice, I could hear Marcus's phone buzzing repeatedly in his pocket. He actually stepped out during the burial to take a call, returning with some excuse about a server crash at the office. That was the first time I really looked at my husband and wondered who he had become. Or maybe who he had always been underneath the charm and promises. But I pushed those thoughts away, telling myself grief was making me oversensitive, that building a company required sacrifices from both of us. Our 5th anniversary came and went without acknowledgement from Marcus. I'd made reservations at the restaurant where we'd had our first date, bought a new dress, even got my hair professionally styled for the first time in years. I sat at that table for 3 hours, ordering glass after glass of wine, watching happy couples at other tables before finally accepting he wasn't coming. His text at midnight said simply that he forgot there was a product launch, he'd make it up to me. But he never did make it up to me, not really. The gifts became generic, purchased by his assistant and wrapped by the store. The conversations became surface level about scheduling and household logistics rather than dreams and feelings. The physical intimacy disappeared gradually, then all at once, until we were essentially roommates in that beautiful house I'd made into a home. The changes in Marcus accelerated when he hired Brittany as his executive assistant. She was 24, fresh out of Wharton with an MBA, and legs that seemed to go on forever. Marcus insisted she was essential to the company's growth, that her connections from business school were invaluable. I watched him light up when talking about her insights and suggestions, in a way he hadn't done with me in years. The late nights became later and more frequent. Marcus would stumble in at 2 or 3 in the morning, smelling like cologne that wasn't his usual brand, with explanations that didn't quite add up. Server maintenance doesn't require the CEO to be physically present. Strategy meetings don't typically happen at cocktail lounges. But questioning him led to arguments about trust and support, accusations that I was jealous of his success. Then came the sudden interest in his appearance. Marcus had always been reasonably fit, but suddenly he was at the gym every morning at 5, hiring a personal trainer, buying entirely new wardrobes. The teeth whitening, the expensive haircuts, the designer watches, it all happened within a few months. When I complimented him on looking good, hoping to rekindle something between us, he barely acknowledged. It just mentioned that image was important in the tech world. The company parties became exercises in humiliation. I'd stand next to Marcus while he worked the room, and when people asked what I did, he'd jump in before I could answer, saying I kept myself busy with charity work and maintaining our home. The successful attorney I'd worked so hard to become was erased, replaced by this decorative wife persona I didn't recognize. My 32nd birthday was the breaking point for my denial. I'd mentioned the date several times, even circled it on the kitchen calendar. I made reservations at a small bistro, nothing fancy, just hoping for a quiet dinner together. I sat at that restaurant alone, watching the candle burn down, calling and texting with no response. The waiter's pitying looks were almost unbearable. Marcus came home the next afternoon, surprised when I was upset, claiming he thought my birthday was the following week. His new friends were all tech bros who treated their wives and girlfriends like accessories. Brad was on his 2nd divorce, something he talked about like a badge of honor. Kenny openly bragged about his affairs, showing pictures of women who weren't his wife at poker nights. I could hear from upstairs. Jake was Marcus's closest friend, his business partner, and the one who seemed to encourage every bad decision. Tom was the only decent one in the group, married to his college sweetheart, always looking uncomfortable when the conversation turned crude. But even he never spoke up, never challenged the toxic culture that was developing in my own home during those monthly poker games. The suggestion of separate bedrooms came after Marcus claimed my early morning alarms for court appearances were disrupting his sleep. He needed to be sharp for investor meetings, he said, and quality rest was essential. I agreed, thinking it was temporary, not realizing I was essentially being erased from my own marriage. The credit card statements started showing patterns I couldn't ignore. Charges at hotels during lunch hours, always for exactly 2 hours, always paid in cash afterward to avoid details. Expensive jewelry purchases from stores I'd never been to for pieces I never received. Restaurant bills for two at places he claimed to be eating alone while working late. The Hamptons weekend was supposed to be a reset for us. I'd booked a cottage, planned romantic dinners, even bought lingerie I thought might remind him of our early days. But Marcus spent the entire time on his phone, stepping out for calls, claiming urgent emails needed responses. When I found a woman's earring in his car that Sunday, not mine, he exploded in anger, accusing me of being paranoid, of trying to create problems where none existed. My mother noticed the change in me before I fully admitted it to myself. She pulled me aside at a family dinner, touched my face gently, and asked when I'd last smiled, really smiled. Not the fake one I'd perfected for public appearances. I couldn't answer her because I honestly didn't remember. The partnership offer at my firm should have been a celebration. I'd worked for 7 years to reach that level, billing more hours than any other associate, winning cases that brought in millions in revenue. When I told Marcus, his response was a distracted nod and a comment about how the extra money would help with his company's expansion. No congratulations, no pride, no recognition of my achievement. Thanksgiving was when I knew the marriage was truly dead. Marcus left in the middle of dinner with my family, claiming a server emergency that couldn't wait. My mother had spent 2 days cooking, my sister had driven in from Boston with her kids, and he just walked out like none of it mattered. He came back at 3 a.m, drunk, lipstick on his collar. He didn't even bother to hide. Christmas morning was the final insult. I'd bought him a vintage watch he'd admired months ago, had it engraved, wrapped it myself. He handed me an envelope with a generic gift card to a department store, not even in a proper card, just the store envelope. The amount was substantial, but the message was clear that I wasn't worth the effort of actual thought. The text message I saw on his phone wasn't meant for me to see. He'd left it on the counter while showering, and it lit up with a preview that said everything I needed to know. "Can't wait to see you tonight, baby." From someone saved as just the letter B. When I confronted him, he didn't even have the decency to look guilty, just irritated that I was invading his privacy. His explanation was insulting in its laziness. People in tech were just more casual with language, he claimed. Everyone called everyone baby or babe. It was like saying buddy or pal. Did I really think he had time for an affair with everything going on at the company? Was I really that insecure and bitter about his success? I suggested marriage counseling, found a therapist who specialized in executive couples, even scheduled the appointments around his calendar. We went to exactly 3 sessions. In the first, Marcus spent the entire time on his phone. In the second, he argued with everything the therapist suggested. After the third, he declared it pointless, a waste of money and time, said, if I couldn't be happy with our life, maybe the problem was me. That night I started looking at our finances more carefully. What I found would have sent me into a panic if I hadn't been so numb already. Money was being moved, accounts were being closed, and opened assets were being shifted in ways that made no sense unless you were planning something. But I kept quiet, kept watching, kept documenting, because my father hadn't raised a fool, and being a lawyer meant I knew the value of evidence. Thursday nights were sacred in our house, but not for us as a couple. It was Marcus's monthly poker game with his college friends, a tradition that had somehow survived longer than most aspects of our marriage. The same crew always showed up like clockwork. Brad with his expensive cigars and stories about his latest young girlfriend Kenny, with his crude jokes and wandering eyes that made me uncomfortable in my own home, Jake with his calculated smile and whispered conversations with Marcus about offshore opportunities, and Tom, poor Tom, who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else but never had the courage to stop coming. I was upstairs in my home office trying to focus on a merger agreement for one of my biggest clients. The house carried sound in ways Marcus never seemed to notice or care about. Their voices drifted up through the heating vents loud and loose from the expensive whiskey Marcus always brought out for these nights. Usually I could tune them out, lose myself in work until they left around midnight. But something about tonight felt different from the moment they arrived. The energy downstairs was celebratory, more animated than usual. I heard champagne corks popping, which was odd since they typically stuck to whiskey and beer. Brad's booming laugh echoed through the floor, followed by what sounded like backslapping and congratulations. My fingers slowed on the keyboard as I found myself listening despite not wanting to. That's when I heard Marcus mention me not by name at first, just as the ball and chain upstairs. The phrase hit like cold water, shocking in its casual cruelty. The others laughed, that particularly male laugh that comes at someone else's expense, and I felt my stomach twist with a combination of hurt and anger I'd been suppressing for months. Brad's voice cut through, next slightly slurred but clear enough. He asked when Marcus was finally going to dump me and live a little. The question hung in the air for a moment, and I found myself holding my breath, waiting for my husband to defend me to shut down that line of conversation. Instead, what came next changed everything. Marcus's response was delivered with the same tone he used for announcing quarterly earnings. Actually, he said, "I'm finalizing the divorce papers tomorrow." The words were so matter-of-fact, so casual, like he was discussing changing phone plans or selling a car. The eruption of celebration that followed was immediate and enthusiastic. High fives, the sound of glasses clinking, someone whistling appreciatively. I stood frozen in my office, my hands trembling slightly as the reality of what I'd just heard sank in. Not just that he was planning to divorce me, which honestly wasn't a complete shock given how things had been, but that he'd been planning it without any discussion, any attempt at resolution, and was celebrating it like a victory with his friends while I sat right upstairs. Kenny's voice pierced through, next mentioning Brittany from Marcus's office, how she was definitely waiting for him to be free. The way they all laughed, knowingly, conspiratorially, told me everything I'd suspected was true. Marcus didn't deny it, didn't even pretend to be discreet. Instead, he bragged about already having a condo downtown, one he'd been setting up without my knowledge. Jake's contribution was the most shocking. He mentioned something about the Cayman account working perfectly for transferring assets. They were discussing financial manipulation as casually as sports scores. Marcus explained how he'd been moving money for months using company funds to hide personal assets, creating a paper trail that would leave me with nothing. Brad offered his divorce lawyer's contact information, bragging about how his first wife got nothing despite 10 years of marriage. The level of premeditation, the careful planning to destroy me financially while I sat in the house I'd made our home working on my career, believing we were still trying to make things work, it was breathtaking in its cruelty. They discussed the prenup we'd signed years ago with Marcus, laughing about loopholes his lawyer had found ways to invalidate my claims to anything acquired during the marriage. He sounded proud of himself, like outsmarting the woman who'd supported him was some kind of achievement worth celebrating. Tom's weak protest barely registered. He mentioned that I was a lawyer too, might know how to fight back. Marcus's dismissal was swift and condescending. I did corporate law, he explained to them, not divorce law. I wouldn't know what hit me until it was too late. The assumption of my ignorance, the underestimation of my abilities, it was insulting on a level that went beyond the betrayal. The toast that followed was the final insult. Brad raised his glass to freedom and younger models, and they all joined in their laughter, cruel and satisfied. The sound of it, the pure joy they took in my impending humiliation, sparked something inside me that had been dormant for too long. I stood at the top of the stairs looking down at the warm light spilling from the poker room, listening to these men plan my destruction like it was entertainment. But in my hand, I held my phone with banking documents I'd screenshot earlier that day. Documents that told a very different story than the one Marcus was spinning downstairs. The decision to walk down those stairs wasn't about courage or confrontation. It was about a simple realization that I'd been playing defense in my own life for far too long. My father, the federal judge who'd raised me, had taught me that the best lawyers never revealed their hand until the moment of maximum impact. And as I descended each step deliberately calmly, I knew that moment had arrived. The silence that fell when I entered the poker room was absolute and immediate. 5 grown men frozen like teenagers caught with their father's liquor. Cards literally stopped mid-deal in Jake's hands. Brad's cigar smoke curling forgotten from his fingers. Kenny's drink halfway to his mouth. Marcus's face drained of color so quickly I thought he might faint, his eyes wide with a combination of shock and fear that would have been satisfying if I wasn't so focused on what needed to happen next. I took my time surveying the room, making eye contact with each of them slowly, deliberately. The poker table was littered with evidence of their celebration champagne flutes, mixed with whiskey glasses, chips scattered carelessly. Marcus's phone face up, showing messages I could read from where I stood. "Good evening, gentlemen," I said, my voice steady and pleasant, like I was greeting dinner party guests. "Don't let me interrupt your celebration." The words hung in the air while they scrambled for composure, for excuses for exits that weren't there. Brad tried to recover first, forcing out a laugh that sounded more like a cough. "Hey, Delia. We were just playing cards, having a few drinks, you know how it is." His attempt at casual normality was almost pitifully transparent sweat, already beading on his forehead despite the cool evening. I walked slowly to the table, each step measured, reaching past Jake to pick up Marcus's whiskey glass. I held it to the light, examining the amber liquid like a sommelier, then took a delicate sniff. "Macallan 25. I observed the bottle you've been saving for a special occasion. Is finalizing our divorce really worth breaking out the good stuff?" Marcus's mouth opened and closed several times before he managed to speak. "Delia, we were just joking around, you know how guys talk when they drink." The denial was reflexive, pathetic, especially considering I'd heard everything, and he had to know I'd heard everything from the look on my face. My smile in response was genuine, which seemed to unsettle them more than anger would have. "Oh, I don't think you were joking at all, sweetheart." The endearment dripped with enough acid to etch glass, and I saw him flinch at the tone. I pulled out the empty chair at the table, the one they kept for when someone else joined, though they never invited anyone else to these sacred Thursday nights. Sitting down with deliberate calm, I picked up the deck of cards Jake had abandoned and began shuffling with the professional ease that comes from years of practice they didn't know I had. You know, boys. I began continuing to shuffle with smooth, practiced motions. I learned poker from my grandfather. Federal judge for 30 years, played with other judges every Friday night. He taught me that the key to winning isn't just having good cards, it's knowing exactly what your opponents are holding before they do. Kenny started to stand his chair, scraping against the hardwood. "Maybe we should call it a night. Everybody's had a lot to drink, things got out of hand." His nervous energy was palpable, already calculating his exit strategy. "Stay," I said, not a request, but a command that carried enough authority to make him sink back into his seat. "You'll want to hear this, especially you, Kenny. Those marketing consultation fees you've been receiving from Marcus's company, the ones that don't seem to correspond to any actual marketing work, those are particularly interesting." The color drained from Kenny's face as the implication hit him. Jake shifted uncomfortably. Brad stubbed out his cigar with shaking hands, and Tom looked genuinely confused about what was happening. But Marcus, my soon-to-be ex-husband, was starting to understand that something had shifted, that the script he'd written for tomorrow wasn't going to play out as planned. I set the cards down in a perfect fan display, a poker trick my grandfather had taught me that I'd never shown Marcus in 8 years of marriage. The flourish was intentional, a small demonstration that they'd all severely underestimated who they were dealing with. "Marcus," I said, my voice conversational, "before you finalize those divorce papers tomorrow, the ones you've apparently been planning in secret for months, there's something we should discuss." I paused, making eye contact with each man at the table, watching them squirm under the weight of anticipation. "Did you really think I wouldn't notice you've been stealing from my father's trust fund?" The question landed like a bomb in the middle of the table. The silence that followed was complete, broken only by the sound of Marcus's glass slipping from his hand, whiskey spilling across the felt surface of the poker table. "The account you thought was under your company's name. I continued pulling out my phone and placing it on the table, the one you've been using as collateral for your expansion loans, moving money in and out like it's your personal piggy bank. Did you never wonder why the account signature cards were so easy to access? Why the bank never questioned your transfers? Marcus's face had gone from pale to ashen, his hands visibly trembling as he reached for his phone. "That's not possible," he stammered. "I checked everything. My lawyer verified. The ownership structure, the corporate registration." His voice cracked on the last words, the confidence from moments ago evaporating like morning mist. I pulled up the screenshots on my phone, the ones I'd been collecting for months, documenting every transaction, every forged signature, every fraudulent transfer. My maiden name trust, Sweetheart, established by my father when I was 18, the one that's been funding your entire company from day one. Funny how you never actually read the trust documents, just assumed that because you had access, you had ownership. The documentation was all there in beautiful, undeniable detail. The original trust structure, the terms that explicitly prevented spousal access without written trustee approval, which of course had never been granted. The forensic accounting report I'd commissioned quietly showing exactly how Marcus had been siphoning funds through shell companies and fake consulting agreements. Jake tried to speak, but I held up a hand to stop him. "Oh, Jake, you'll especially want to stay quiet right now. Those consulting fees you've been receiving, the ones coded as business development, but actually used to set up those Cayman accounts Marcus mentioned. The IRS is going to find those fascinating. Did you know? Financial fraud over $250,000 is a federal offense." "Of course you did. You're a smart man. Just not quite smart enough to cover your tracks properly." The power of attorney Marcus had been relying on the one he thought gave him carte blanche to raid the trust. I pulled that up next. "Remember this, Marcus? Last year's Christmas party. You were so drunk you could barely stand. You signed 12 documents that night thinking they were year-end tax forms. One of them was actually a revocation of any power of attorney past, present, or future. Your lawyer really should have caught that, but then again you get what you pay for with discount legal services." The trust fund details unfolded like a prosecutor's closing argument, each piece of evidence building on the last until the complete picture was undeniable. My father, with 30 years of judicial experience, hadn't just left me money, he'd left me a fortress of legal protections that Marcus had been too arrogant to properly investigate. Every document was structured to protect the assets from exactly the kind of financial manipulation Marcus had attempted. The irony was beautiful in its simplicity. The very sexism that made Marcus assume I wouldn't understand complex financial structures had made him sloppy. He'd treated me like a decoration in his life for so long that he'd forgotten I graduated summa cum laude from law school, that I'd spent 7 years handling multi-million-dollar corporate transactions. His contempt for me had been his downfall. Brad tried to edge toward the door, his earlier bravado completely evaporated. "I think I should go," he mumbled, reaching for his coat with trembling hands. The man who'd been advocating for my husband to dump me and live a little was now desperate to distance himself from the situation. "Brad," I said sweetly, "didn't your second wife Patricia get everything in the divorce, including that boat you loved so much? The 40-foot sailboat you named Freedom, ironic name, considering how much of your freedom you lost when she found out about those hidden assets you thought were so clever. Seems like you're not very good at giving divorce advice after all." He froze, his face cycling through emotions from shock to anger to fear as he processed that I knew about his personal financial disasters. The bravado about his lawyer getting his first wife, nothing had been a lie to save face, and now everyone at the table knew it. My friend Sarah. I continued, returning my attention to the group. "You remember her, Marcus? The quiet woman you said was too boring to invite to dinner parties. Well, she's actually a forensic accountant who specializes in high-net-worth divorces. She's been tracking every dollar, every transfer, every hidden account for the past 6 months. The Cayman accounts, the Swiss holdings, that cryptocurrency wallet you think nobody knows about, we have everything." Jake's involvement went deeper than anyone at the table except Marcus knew. Those consulting fees weren't just about hiding money, they were about defrauding investors. "The IRS will love hearing about your creative accounting, Jake. Did you know that when you helped Marcus inflate the company valuations for that last funding round, you committed securities fraud? That's FBI territory, not just IRS. How do you think your wife will handle visiting you in federal prison? Kenny's panic was reaching a crescendo. I had nothing to do with this. He practically shouted, his voice cracking like a teenager's. I just received payments for legitimate marketing work. I have invoices, contracts, everything's above board. My laugh was genuine this time. Kenny, those invoices are fascinating. Marketing services for a tech company. Yet you can't name a single campaign, you've run a single metric, you've tracked a single result you've delivered. You know what the IRS calls that money laundering. But don't worry, I'm sure your wife will be very understanding when the federal agents show up at your door. Again. Tom had been silent through most of this, his face a mask of shock and growing anger, but not at me. He was staring at Marcus with a combination of disgust and disbelief. Delia. I swear I didn't know about any of this. These Thursday games were just supposed to be poker catching up normal stuff. I had no idea they were planning this behind your back. I softened slightly, recognizing the genuine distress in his voice. I know, Tom. You're the only decent one here. You actually love your wife, respect her, treat her like a partner instead of property. You might want to reconsider your friend group after tonight, though. These men aren't who you thought they were. Marcus finally found his voice again, and with it came the anger I'd been expecting. You can't prove anything, he spat, his face flushing red. My lawyers will destroy you in court. You think you're so smart, but you're just a contract lawyer. You don't know anything about divorce law, about financial structuring. I've been planning this for over a year. Everything is airtight. The recording started playing from my phone before he finished speaking. His own voice filled the room, clear and undeniable, discussing the divorce papers, the hidden money, the plans to leave me with nothing, Brad's comments about dumping me, Kenny's remarks about Brittany, Jake's explanation of the offshore accounts. Every damning word they'd spoken in the last hour was there in perfect digital clarity. The security footage was the next revelation. Our new nanny cam system, I explained, watching their faces cycle through fresh waves of panic. The one you didn't know about because you haven't actually looked at our home security in 2 years. Every poker night for the past 6 months is recorded video and audio stored in the cloud. Every conversation about hiding assets, every discussion about your affairs, every plan to commit financial fraud, it's all preserved in high definition. But Brittany's involvement was perhaps the most satisfying reveal. Oh, she's been very helpful, I said, savoring Marcus's expression, especially after learning she wasn't the only one. Did you really think a smart, ambitious woman like her wouldn't figure out you were also sleeping with Jennifer from accounting, and Lisa from marketing, and that intern whose name you probably don't even remember? Marcus's jaw dropped as he processed this information. Brittany had been secretly documenting everything, screenshots of texts, recordings of conversations, emails, where Marcus explicitly discussed using company funds for personal expenses. She'd reached out to me 2 weeks ago, furious about being played, ready to testify about the financial fraud she'd witnessed. The other women had similar stories. Jennifer had emails showing Marcus promising her a promotion in exchange for silence about their affair. Lisa had text messages where he discussed hiding money from his wife that would be me, and jokes about taking me for everything in the divorce. The intern Rebecca, just 22 years old, had recordings of Marcus pressuring her, threatening her job if she didn't comply with his advances. His company, the great success he was so proud of, the empire he'd built, while I played the supportive wife, was 70% funded by my inheritance. The documentation was all there. Every investment traced back to the trust, every expansion funded by my father's money. The company Marcus claimed he built from nothing was actually built on the foundation of my family's wealth, which he'd accessed through forgery and fraud. So here's what's going to happen, gentlemen, I said, standing up from the table, gathering my phone and the small recorder I'd placed on the side table when I entered. The real divorce papers were filed this morning at 9 a.m., freezing all assets pending investigation. The FBI received a package of documentation about the securities fraud this afternoon. The IRS will be contacting each of you about your interesting financial arrangements by Monday. Marcus lunged to his feet, his chair crashing backward. You can't do this, you vindictive witch. This is my company, my success, my money. You were nothing before me. Just another lawyer, nobody special. I made you relevant, gave you a life worth living, and this is how you repay me." The mask had finally slipped, completely revealing the man I'd been married to all along. Not the charming law student who brought me coffee, but this narcissistic, cruel person who genuinely believed that my worth was determined by my proximity to him. "Actually, Marcus," I said calmly, heading toward the door, "you were nothing before me. A law school dropout living on credit cards and ego. Every success you've had was built on my money, my connections, my sleepless nights keeping us afloat while you chased your dreams. The only thing you ever gave me was the gift of finally seeing who you really are. And for that, I suppose I should thank you." The meeting with my legal team the next morning was a symphony of controlled destruction. The conference room at Preston Hoffman and Associates was filled with bankers' boxes of evidence, 3 laptops running simultaneously, and a team of lawyers who specialized in making entitled men regret underestimating their wives. Margaret Preston herself, a legend in New York divorce law, had taken my case personally after reviewing the preliminary documentation. Marcus arrived 45 minutes late with a single lawyer, some discount attorney he'd found online, who specialized in quick divorces. The man looked like he'd rather be anywhere else once he saw the army arrayed against him and started reviewing the evidence we'd prepared. Marcus still carried himself with that artificial confidence, but I could see the cracks in his facade, the dark circles under his eyes, the slight tremor in his hands. The whistleblower testimony from Brittany was devastating in its thoroughness. She appeared via video link, having already provided sworn affidavits about the financial irregularities she'd witnessed. She detailed how Marcus had instructed her to create false invoices, backdate documents, and transfer money between accounts to hide the source of funds. Her MBA from Wharton meant she understood exactly what crimes she was describing, and her testimony was precise, professional, and utterly damning. The IRS investigation was already underway, triggered by the package I'd sent through Sarah, my forensic accountant friend. They'd frozen Marcus's personal accounts that morning, along with several corporate accounts that showed suspicious activity. The look on his face when his lawyer informed him his credit cards had been declined at the coffee shop was almost worth the years of emotional abuse. The house division was non-negotiable. The Westchester home had been purchased entirely with trust funds, the documentation clearly showing the money trail from my father's estate. Marcus had no claim to it whatsoever, despite his name being on the deed through fraudulent means. His personal belongings would be packed and placed in storage, the locks already changed that morning by a security company. The company shares were the real blow to Marcus's ego. 70% ownership transferred to me immediately based on the fraud and breach of fiduciary duty. The board of directors, who'd been informed of the situation the previous evening, had already voted to remove Marcus as CEO effective immediately. They'd seen the writing on the wall, understanding that any association with financial fraud would destroy the company's reputation and their investments. His parents called while we were in negotiations, his mother crying on speakerphone, his father's voice heavy with disappointment. "We warned you about this," his father said. "Told you that treating people like stepping stones would come back to haunt you. We raised you better than this, Marcus. That poor girl supported you through everything, and this is how you repay her." My mother, on the other hand, called me privately with nothing but pride in her voice. "I raised a fighter," she said. "Your father would be so proud of how you handled this. He always said you had the instinct for justice, for knowing when to wait and when to strike. You honored his memory by not letting anyone take advantage of his legacy." The social media explosion was unexpected but gratifying. Someone at the poker game, probably Tom, had shared what happened with his wife. She'd shared it with other wives in their social circle, and within 24 hours, the story of Marcus's downfall was spreading through New York's tech and legal communities like wildfire. My phone buzzed constantly with messages of support from women I'd met at those awful dinner parties, many sharing their own stories of financial abuse. Brad's wife, Patricia, called me directly, laughing until she cried when I told her about exposing his lies about their divorce. "He's been telling people I got lucky with a sympathetic judge," she said, "but the truth is, he hid assets so poorly that my lawyer found them in 2 days. The boat he claims I stole. He'd put it in his girlfriend's name thinking he was clever. The girlfriend who then sold it and kept the money. Karma really is beautiful sometimes. The network that formed from this situation was powerful and unexpected. Within a week, I was hosting meetings with 6 other women who discovered their husbands were hiding assets or planning secret divorces. We called it the Thursday Night Club, a direct response to those poker games where our destruction was planned over whiskey and cigars. We shared lawyers, accountants, strategies, and most importantly, emotional support. Sarah's forensic accounting had uncovered even more than we'd initially found. $2 million scattered across 17 different accounts, some in Marcus's name, some in shell companies, some in his parents' names without their knowledge. There were cryptocurrency wallets, gold purchases, even a small yacht registered in the Bahamas that he'd bought with company funds claiming it was for client entertainment. Marcus's final attempt at reconciliation came 3 weeks later. He asked to meet at a coffee shop neutral territory, looking haggard and defeated. His company was in crisis without him, investors pulling out, employees quitting in droves. His apartment, the bachelor pad he'd set up with Brittany in mind, had been seized as part of the asset freeze. He was staying with Jake, who was dealing with his own IRS problems. His plea was pathetic in its desperation. He admitted to the affairs, all of them claiming they meant nothing, that I was the only woman he'd ever really loved. He confessed to the gambling problem that had driven him to steal the pressure to maintain an image of success that had consumed him. He even cried actual tears begging for another chance, promising therapy counseling, whatever it took. My response was measured and final. "You plan to humiliate me," I said, keeping my voice level, despite the anger still burning inside. "You sat with your friends and laughed about destroying me, about leaving me with nothing after I gave you everything. You didn't just betray our marriage, you betrayed the fundamental trust that one human being should have for another. There's no coming back from that, Marcus. No amount of therapy can fix what's broken in you." His breakdown was complete, then all pretense gone, admitting things I hadn't even discovered yet. The cocaine habit that had started at tech parties, the escort service charges, hidden in corporate expenses, the other investor he defrauded, who was now threatening criminal charges. He was a hollow man, all surface and no substance, finally revealed for everyone to see. The final divorce papers were signed 6 weeks after that poker night. Marcus lost everything that mattered to him: his company, his reputation, his carefully cultivated image as a tech genius. He kept his clothes, his personal items, and a used Honda Civic that had been his first car, the only vehicle not purchased with stolen funds. The sight of him driving away in that car, the same one he'd been so embarrassed by in law school, felt like poetic justice. Tom surprised me by sending flowers with a genuine apology. His note explained how that poker night had opened his eyes to the toxic culture he'd been passively participating in. He'd confronted Marcus about his behavior years ago, but had been told to mind his own business. He regretted not pushing harder, not speaking up more forcefully. He and his wife had cut ties with the entire group, choosing instead to spend their time with people who valued integrity over income. The company board meeting where they officially transferred control to me was surreal. Sitting in the CEO chair where Marcus had once held court, looking at the faces of board members who dismissed me as just the wife at countless events, now having to report to me, it was a reversal of fortune that felt almost scripted. But I'd earned it not through manipulation or fraud, but by protecting what was rightfully mine and exposing those who'd tried to steal it. My first act as CEO was promoting the female COO Marcus had been systematically undermining for 2 years. Patricia Chen was brilliant, innovative, and had been carrying the company despite Marcus's interference. Together, we restructured the entire organization, creating transparent financial systems, implementing ethical guidelines, and most importantly, building a culture where talent was recognized regardless of gender. The Business Journal article about the takeover was titled, "From Trophy Wife to Tech CEO, The Delia Morrison Story." While I didn't love the framing, the content was accurate and important. It detailed how Marcus had built his empire on a foundation of fraud and how I'd used my legal expertise to reclaim what was mine. The article went viral, inspiring dozens of women to look more carefully at their own financial situations. 6 months after that poker night, I stood in my new office, formerly Marcus's, looking out at the Manhattan skyline. The company had not just survived the transition, it had thrived. Our latest quarterly report showed a 20% increase in revenue. Employee satisfaction scores were at an all-time high, and we'd just secured our largest client contract ever. The toxic bro culture Marcus had cultivated was gone, replaced by an environment where innovation came from every level of the organization. Patricia and I had implemented a radical transparency policy where all salaries were public within the company, eliminating the gender pay gaps Marcus had ignored. We'd created a legitimate mentorship program, not the fake networking events that were actually just drinking sessions. The company that Marcus had built on a foundation of deception was now standing stronger than ever on a foundation of integrity. The old poker table from our house had been donated to a charity auction benefiting a women's shelter. It raised $12,000, the irony not lost on anyone who knew the story. The buyer was a woman whose own husband had gambled away their savings. She planned to use it for family game nights with her kids, transforming a symbol of betrayal into something positive. I met David at one of those charity events, a widower who'd lost his wife to cancer 3 years earlier. He was there volunteering, teaching financial literacy to women leaving abusive relationships. He didn't know who I was at first, didn't care about my newfound wealth or position. We talked for 3 hours about books, travel, his work as a pediatric surgeon, my plans for the company. He asked about my dreams, not my bank account, about what made me laugh, not what I could do for his career. Our first real date was coffee on a Saturday morning, nothing fancy, just conversation and genuine connection. David listened to my story without judgment, without trying to fix me or save me. He shared his own grief, his own journey of rebuilding after loss. We took things slowly, 6 months of friendship before anything romantic developed. He understood that trust, once shattered, had to be rebuilt carefully, one small piece at a time. Marcus's complete downfall became public when the securities fraud charges were filed. The trial was brief, the evidence overwhelming. 18 months in minimum security federal prison, followed by 3 years probation and massive fines that consumed what little he had left. The tech genius, who'd once commanded rooms full of investors, was now working in the prison library, teaching basic computer skills to other inmates. Brittany started her own company with seed funding. I provided a platform for anonymous workplace reporting of harassment and financial fraud. Her experience had transformed her from a naive graduate into a fierce advocate for corporate accountability. We met quarterly to discuss business, and she'd become something unexpected, a friend who understood the unique betrayal of being used by someone who claimed to care about you. The other wives from the poker circle had their own victories. Brad's ex, Patricia, became a financial advisor specializing in divorce planning. Kenny's wife divorced him after discovering 12 years of affairs, taking him for everything in a spectacular court battle that made the New York Post. Jake's wife worked with the FBI to expose the full extent of his financial crimes, getting immunity in exchange for her testimony. My therapy journey was essential to the healing process. Dr. Elizabeth Martinez specialized in betrayal trauma, helping me understand that Marcus's behavior wasn't about my inadequacy, but about his own emptiness. We worked through the gaslighting, the slow erosion of self-worth, the way I'd been trained to accept less and less while giving more and more. Recovery wasn't linear. There were days when the anger threatened to consume me, nights when I questioned every decision I'd ever made. The speaking engagements started after the Business Journal article. Women's conferences, law schools, business forums, all wanting to hear how I'd turned the tables on someone who'd tried to destroy me. I was selective about which invitations I accepted, focusing on those that would actually help women protect themselves. My standard speech, titled Trust But Verify: A Guide to Financial Self-Defense in Marriage, had been downloaded over 1 million times. The book deal came from a major publisher who wanted the full story. The Thursday Night Club became a bestseller, with proceeds going to organizations that helped women achieve financial independence. The dedication read simply, "To my father who taught me that justice isn't about revenge, it's about balance being restored." My new home, a brownstone in Brooklyn that I'd purchased with my own money, had one firm rule: no poker nights. Instead, we hosted game nights with couple friends, genuine friends who valued authenticity over appearance. David had moved in after a year, bringing his golden retriever and his collection of board games. The laughter that filled those rooms was real, unforced, free of the undercurrents of competition and contempt that had poisoned my marriage. The law practice I started specialized in helping women protect their assets before, during, and after marriage. We offered sliding scale fees pro bono work for abuse survivors and, most importantly, education about financial literacy and legal rights. Every client got the same advice my father had given me, but I'd failed to follow: initially love deeply, trust carefully, and always keep your own counsel about money. Tom and his wife Ellen became unexpected allies in this work. Tom testified in several cases about the toxic culture of those poker nights, how casual misogyny and financial abuse were treated as normal conversation. His courage in speaking out despite the professional backlash from his former friend group helped several women prove emotional abuse in their divorce proceedings. He'd lost friends but gained integrity, a trade he said he should have made years earlier. The year anniversary of that poker night arrived with little fanfare. I was in a board meeting when I realized the date, and for a moment I remembered the fear and hurt of sitting at the top of those stairs, hearing my life being dismantled for entertainment. But then Patricia made a joke about our latest competitor. David texted about dinner plans, and I realized that Marcus's betrayal had inadvertently given me everything he'd tried to take away. The lesson I carried forward, the one I shared with every woman who reached out for advice, wasn't about revenge or even justice. It was about recognizing your own worth independent of anyone else's validation. Marcus had thought my value was tied to him, that without his success, I was nothing. But power isn't in the money or position someone else grants you. It's in knowing your worth and never letting anyone convince you otherwise. When someone shows you their true character while thinking you're not watching, believe them the first time. The red flags I'd ignored, dismissed, rationalized away. They'd all been pointing to this moment. That Thursday night poker game wasn't out of character for Marcus. It was the most honest he'd ever been. The tragedy wasn't that he'd planned to betray me. It was that I'd stayed long enough for him to try. The question I asked that night didn't just silence a room full of arrogant men who thought they were untouchable. It gave voice to the woman I'd forgotten I was: the daughter of a federal judge, the law school graduate, the person who'd built a life before Marcus and would build an even better one after him. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's getting everything you deserve while they get exactly what they've earned. Every Thursday night now in my Brooklyn brownstone, I host dinner for women navigating their own betrayals. We call ourselves the Thursday Night Club, reclaiming the night that was once used to plan our destruction. We share stories, strategies, and strength. We teach each other about financial independence, legal protection, and most importantly, the revolutionary act of believing we deserve better. The poker table may be gone, but the lessons it taught remain. Trust is earned in small moments and destroyed in defining ones. Love shouldn't require you to shrink yourself to fit someone else's ego. And when someone gathers their friends to laugh about your pain, remember that the last laugh isn't always the loudest, but it's often the most satisfying. As I write this, David is in the kitchen making dinner, the dog is sprawled on the rug, and life has a warmth that my marriage never provided despite all its luxury. Marcus gave me a house, but I've built a home. He gave me a title as his wife, but I've earned respect as myself. He tried to take everything, but in the end, he gave me the greatest gift possible: my freedom and the knowledge that I was always stronger than he wanted me to believe. That's the thing about Thursday nights now, they're just another evening, unremarkable and peaceful. No performances, no ulterior motives, no plans being made behind closed doors. Just life as it should be, honest, authentic, and free from the weight of someone else's deception. And that ordinariness, that simple peace, is worth more than all the poker chips in the world. What would you have done if you'd heard your spouse planning your destruction while laughing with friends? Have you ever had to stand up to someone who underestimated you completely? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, Please hit the like button and subscribe for more content about overcoming betrayal and finding your strength. Share this with anyone who needs to hear that they're not alone, that there's life, beautiful, powerful life after betrayal. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember your worth isn't determined by anyone else's inability to see it. Stay strong, trust yourself, and never forget that the best chapter of your life might just begin when someone else tries to write your ending.